Part 3, Incursion to Impose and Dispose. So welcome to my video. Make sure you subscribe, like and share this video so that more people can learn. And I am so glad to do this video. So this is part 3. Watch out for part 4, because we, like I've said, we're gonna go deep and deeper. So make sure you watch part 1, 2, now 3, and then watch part 4, because we're gonna go deep and deep. Thank you so much. So today we're gonna be looking at the parallels of the Lemba and the Luhya. So before I go in, I just want to make sure you know that all the Luhya sub-tribes or the clans, they're all one people. But these people have gone through a lot of things, and are still going through it politically, socially, and 99% of them, they don't understand what happened, why these things happen, and what people or what natural circumstances or things that led to this thing happening to them. So we're going to be looking at those things. So today, but basically I'm going to be looking on the parallels of the Lemba and the Luhyas. So welcome. So make sure you share and subscribe. So the parallels of the Lemba and Luhya, are they just by coincidence, or something else happened? So welcome. So one of the besides the Ptolemy, one of the most hidden thing that happened, and nobody talks about it in a real way that it's supposed to, is the Luo military campaign, or the incursion by the Kato tribes. How they came and surrounded the Buganda, the Kitara kingdom, the why, the who, and the whence. Those things are never discussed in a way they're supposed to be. So I am going to try as much as I can to discuss those things. So the Luo military campaign. Now if you look at this web, you see all the modern Luhya groups can be traced back to Uganda, or Buganda, ancient Buganda, or the ancient Kitara. So you can see all the Luhyas coming down from Tororo, Uganda, going to Mount Elgon, and there they were hiding among the Kalenjins. And then you have another branch going down to Kisumu, Tanzania, places like Shirazi, Tanzania, where Maragoli, stayed before coming back and meeting other Luhyas in modern day Western Kenya. So what led to this group? What led them to migrate or leave Uganda, or fleeing from Uganda? What was the main reason? So that's what we're going to be discussing. So in Kenya, you have these family affair or group, basically concocting the entire history of Western Kenya. So it is led by Professor Alan Ogot, and I think the late Grace Ogad. These people have engineered the entire history of the Luos, and basically they've made it look like the Luos were some kind of heroes, and they helped in this way or one way. They were the ones who introduced everything to the Luhyas. But the fact of the matter is the opposite. The Luos never did anything other than copied and destroyed and take the history of Luhya and turn it upside down. So we want to go deep into that, discuss it, how these things were done, and who did what at what time. But basically these people are working for UNESCO and the British, or Britain, whatever. So they work together to make sure they delete the history of the Luhya. It is something that it is still being done today. So you're not going to go down and find the history of Luhya here or there. It is not there. But it is something that Mzungu, they're paying very much. They're paying a lot of money to make sure you don't find anything, anything in the right way. So they delete and then change history. And this is very deliberate. So in Kenyan history, we were told that the Nilos, the plain Nilo, the river Nile, they're just migrating, looking for land. But like I've said in the previous video, where else do you find a group of people migrating with the big shield and long arrows, men making military parades by themselves? Sometimes just group of men, and once they come to a group, they take over your women and leave your only male group by themselves. Where else do you find such a thing like that? Where else? So why did they do that? Why did they conquer, take over, especially the women? They were taking the women, because these were military men coming to subdue and impose and dispose your culture and religion. So in part 5, I will go deep into that. So the Tutsi Hima, the Luo, the Nyamulengo, all these groups are the same. They have the same agenda: delete the culture and impose the culture of either the Mzungu, or the belief system that you have today. So either you accept, given chance, they would even impose even other religions like Hinduism to you, so that you forgot who you are. The main agenda is to make sure you don't have any culture system that protects you or make you who you're supposed to be. They want to give you another software. So for you to have that software, they have to delete what you had and then give you a different software, so that it will be easy for them and other people to control you. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So what the Luos did was a military campaign. What you read in a book about Joka Wino, those are military factions. Those are military mercenaries being sent to conquer, invade, destroy, and then enslave. But in modern times, we're told they were just migrating, looking for pasture, looking for good land. But that's not the case. That is far from the truth.
We are keeping, and we are different from the local people here in Zimbabwe.
So did they tell you specifically you are not like regular Zimbabweans?
Yes, we are not. And in our local dialect, we are called Varemba, and the people who are not of our tribe, who are not the Jews, they are called Shenzi or Shenzi, which means they are not part of us. So we have been told all along that we are different from these people.
Wow,
that's why we do circumcision, because we are a peculiar tribe. We are a chosen people.
So the question is, how did they just come up with the name Shenzi? Because the Shenzi, the Chwezi people, were far north in Uganda, or around the Great Lakes. So how did the Lemba come up with those names and those beliefs? So that's basically what we're gonna be diving into. We're trying to find the parallels, the similarities, the stories, if they're aligned, because there's a lot of similarities between what the Lembas are telling 1,000, 2,000 miles away from the Great Lakes, and the stories that the Luhya people have. So we're gonna be looking at those similarities, So like I've said, these are books. Most of these are reference that I'm making. These are books that were written in between 1901, 1902, all the way to 1950s. And we don't have anything. We, especially the Luhyas, we don't have anything. We did not participate in writing these books, other than what our ancestors told the Mzungu, or the informant told the Mzungu. The informants are basically the Luos. So what these people are telling the Mzungus, or the Tutsi were telling the Mzungu, or the Hima telling the Mzungu, but not us. Mzungu never sat down and asked us, where did you come from? What do you have? Never. It was coming from the enemies. So according to this book, it says the collapse of the Shenzi. Now we're just talking about the Shenzi. The collapse may also have been accentuated by the appearance of the Luo invaders. So according to this book, it collaborates. It will support the idea that the Shenzi kingdom, which the Lembas are talking about, was destroyed by the arrival of the Luo people. But nobody knows how it happened, why it happened. But if you go back to part 1, you see me talking about the Ptolemy, the Greek Romans, working side by side with the Keto tribes in North Africa. And then all of a sudden the Romans disappeared, the Greek Romans disappeared from the picture. And then you have the Keto tribes moving down. And then a few years later, you have another group from Ethiopia going to Portugal and Spain, telling them Zungu another route through West Africa. And then you have Portuguese coming with the Spaniard, working for Roman Catholic, to now take over or conquer one group of people. They come in at the same time. This is well planned, but they don't want you to know. it is something that they calculated together, and one group coming from north, and another coming from East Africa. These are the Somalis and the Ethiopians, and which are today they have changed to Tutsi, Himanyamulengo. And then you have another group, coming down through the Nile with the same agenda. They're working with the same goal. So this is a Tutsi historian. I'm not gonna read everything, but just reference the most important part. According to this guy, and this is a Tutsi, and he's very nice, he's very good, he has documented a lot of things. So according to him, the Shenzi Empire, Basongo Chwezi, I'm gonna reference, let me read the reference. The Shenzi Empire, known also as the Third Timbuzi era, was founded in 630 AD and remained in control of Central, East and Southern Africa for 400 years before disintegrating. The Shenzi Empire had begun in a maritime empire with the commercial interests and military activities that spanned both the South Atlantic, also known as Ethiopian Ocean. Now going down, it says, at the height of its power, the Shenzi Empire maintained trading outspots and military colonies across Asia. Let me go further down because it's a lot of things that, So it says the last ruler of the unified empire was called Bakuku, and he lived till the early 1100. However, the impact of the empire on its subject people was so strong that as late as the start of the 20th century, nearly 1,000 years later, many Africans still self-identify as Bashenzi. Even today, the word Shenzi is still used to define everything that is indigenous to Central and Eastern Africa. So I will go. Let me go forward. So the same Tutsi is still narrating about the Chwezi. He says the term Shenzi should not to be confused with the Chwezi. The term Chwezi initially referred to the commanders and last ruler of the Shenzi Empire, but came to associate almost exclusively with the empire that succeeded the Shenzi in Central Africa. The Shenzi is a derivative of Chwa, meaning the issue, decree, or give order. But anyway, this is now the Tutsi explaining what they knew about the Chwezi. But remember, the Mzungus, the Europeans, at some point they said, they have tried to claim that the Chwezi were the Tutsi or the Hima. But remember, in part 1 and part 2 I've said, there's no way that the Bashenzi were Tutsi or Hima. Why am I saying this? The characters of the Chwezi, these were people who are offering cattle sacrifice. The Tutsi, the Luo, the Hima, they don't have that. They cannot perform those things. The Tutsi, the Hima, the Nyamankore, the Luo, they never circumcise. Those things have never existed among these people. There's so many characters, including the burial, like burying people. These people, before the missionaries, all these groups never buried the dead. Never. Like historically, never. The Maasais, the Somalis, all these groups before Muslim, before Christianity, no record whatsoever of these people buried. Even Ethiopia, the modern Ethiopians, never buried the departed one. They used to live, especially the Oromo, they used to throw them to the hyena. The Maasai, they would tie the deceased to a tree somewhere and leave him right there. Never, historically, they never buried the departed one. It's only certain group of people used to bury the dead. And they knew it very well. But the Muzungu is trying to change history. Remember, I've said they twist things to suit their agenda. So, origin of the name Shenzi is according to this book, it's certain that the people of the greatest region of Africa refer to themselves as Shenzi long before long after founding the Shenzi Empire. Anyway, let me continue because this is a very long video. So Tutsi telling the truth now. He said throughout the existence of the Shenzi Empire, the Shenzi were anti-Christian and also anti-Islamic. The Shenzi had syncretic religion that retained pharaonic as well as Shemitic element. Now you see, I wanted to say something before I got here. So basically, the people we call Shenzi had their own religion. They had their own culture. It was like a software, and this software cannot work together with the Nilotic, the Cushitic, and the Arabic or the Mzungu's version of software. So they have to delete your software for them to give you their own form of whatever. But remember, in the next video, I'll show you why they had to do this, because you'll see everything is gonna tie down together. So they had to remove, delete, and make sure you will never find out what the Shenzi were doing or what these people were up to. So in further down South Africa, the Venda, every oral history of the Venda, they talk about the Shenzi, or coming from the Shenzi. Like let me refer this book. Say reflect the Venda means land, and Vahenda people of the Venda. The inhabitant of the Hero Venda called Vahenda plural and Muvenda singular. They originated from the name of the place Venda. Historically, the Vahenda came from Central Africa, from the Great Lakes of Africa, which the Arabs named Zenzi. Which are the same word come from Shenzi. Now, the Venda in in the history, they have always mentioned the Shenzi people coming from Shenzi, but they don't know where Shenzi or the Chwezi people are. But they always remember coming down from the Shenzi. So let me reference this book, History of the Banyoro Kitara. It says that until archaeological evidence is obtained, it is not possible to say who the Bachwezi were or from where they came from. The writer's guess is that they were one of the last bands of Bahima who came from the northeast but entered Uganda from the west and were destroyed by some calamity. So now down there it says it talks about what the Chwezi people introduced in Uganda. But if you look at a list of things that the Mzungus and the incoming groups were telling or saying that claiming that these are the things that the Bachwezi introduced to Kitara, you see they are talking about their own stuff, things like slaves, talking about forcing people to work for them. That is not part of the Chwezi, the original Chwezi. This is what the Tutsi, Hima, the Luo were doing, forcing people to work for them. And that's later on. Let me go. But the Chwezi, like I've said, these were religious people. Although they had their own king, which was Omwami, and they also had their own priesthood, which were working together side by side, the king and the priest working together. They never had slaves, never had people working for them at any point of time. So Lembas have repeatedly talked about the Shenzi, Vashenzi, just like in that video. They keep talking about the Vashenzi, but the Mzungu, they have ignored, and it's not by accident. They know everything. They can add 1 + 1 + 2, but they have ignored something important because they don't want the history to add up. So they make sure they delete or play that they don't know, they don't understand what they're talking about, just to make sure the history does not add up. Now, going further, we reference ancient books written by in early maybe 1950s, 1890s, whatever, to 1903. You see a lot of people talking about groups of people migrating from Yemen deep into Africa, and with the drum or the ark, and the same story is referenced in the Bible by Jeremiah. Anyway, let me read. It says, however, another tradition in Yemen supports the belief that centuries ago a group of Jews left Yemen for Africa but did not return. The Lemba have indeed tradition that puts them in Africa, more specifically in a city called Sena. Now, Sena is going to be another center of discussion. So the tradition has that they built the city of Sena and Sayun, which means Zion. Now remember, when I referenced this Sayun in I think part 2 of my video, I talked about Sayuna, which is Zion. Now in Africa, on Zambezi, which city of Sena, been located by many scholars, Al-Adris. Now, remember, all these things that you're reading here, they've been referenced or been talked about in by the Mzungu. They know these things, but they just ignore because they know they have lied, they have taught people a lot of lies that they can't even go back and correct their lies, but they know the truth. Now, another book, and remember, all these books were written by the Andalusian historian. Remember when talking about the Moorish people, the Moors who are in Europe. These were the same people writing these books about the Shenzi, the Sayun, the Guion River. They never spoke about this thing, existing elsewhere, or maybe in anywhere outside the the area that we're talking about today. So Arab geographer Al-Idris, circa 1150, who record who records at City in Mulan 1869 that the Shenzi, ranch people, possessor of the Ngoma Lugundu. Now it goes down to say these people of the magic drum, calling themselves the Bashenzi, probably the vendor, became closely associated with the Lemba in the same area. Now you see the Bashenzi and the Lemba are all intertwined, they're all together. Every time you mention one, you have to bring up the other one. So the Ark of the Covenant, or the Drum Lugundu, whatever we want to call it, by the Lemba and coming from Sena and Shenzi. This is being referenced over and over by many other books coming down from Yemen or Yemen. Remember, Yemen used to be part of Africa for a very long time. It's still part of Africa geographically. Even everything about that area is still part of Africa. Yemen, Ethiopia, coming down all the way to South Africa. There was no, this is the same area. So one conclusion is that their oral traditions are very old. This is talking about the Lemba. He said they came from the city of Sena, which indeed discovered in the eastern Hadramaut. Remember Parfit, this guy, the Parfit working for BBC, who would say he claimed he discovered, the Lemba, did the DNA, and discovered that, oh yeah, these people have Middle Eastern DNA or have Semitic DNA. But it's not about DNA, it's about more than that. It's about historical. They know who is who. Anyway, moreover, many clans' name of the Lemba are commonplace in the Hadramaut, such as Haji, Hamisi. Remember, there's a place in Maragol today called Hamisi, Sadiki, and Esremana. Not one of them had the means of ascertaining in advance whether their clan name correlated with the names in Hadramaut. So it will be this Jewish person that provide the background for an alternative history for the Ark, as told by the folk etymologists and the old Arabic texts until the 8th century. The 8th century Arab historian Wahib ibn Munabib and others claim that the hidden Ark was discovered by the Jahrum tribe, which controlled part of northwest Arabia in the Seal Cave where Jeremiah had hidden it, and they took the Ark to Mecca. Arabic sources indicate that those Jews in Yemen and the Ark of the Covenant had the Ark of the Covenant in their possession, and they used it against the enemies on their peninsula. Now it continues, says Prophet, recall that the wide belief is the Wadi Hadramaut, that the Ark had been hidden in a seal cave, perhaps in Wadi Hadramaut itself. Lions and snakes protect the secret of the place. Now this is very interesting, because you will see a lot of parallels about the Ark of the Covenant, the Ngoma being hid, and all this. The parallels comes in when they talk about hiding them in a cave, and about the fire, the drum will burst into fire, or the fire god, or the fire name, the fire ritual. They all align together. So, and then the snake, because you find a lot of stories about snakes with the ark in the cave, the snake, ark, cave, whatever. They're all together. They all tie together. So my question is, why is it always that these Ngoma Lugundu were kept in caves and nowhere else? Because you find the same story among the Lemba. You find the same story about Luhya, drum kept in cave. Why cave? And now you go back to the Bible, you find Jeremiah saying, hey, they had to hide whatever the Ark of the Covenant in a cave. Why so many similarities? So now let's dive deeper. Now the Lemba, you'll find them talking about the Basena or the Masana people. So the Lemba people coming from Sena version, as a father, this mention of the drum. I'm referencing this book, Ngoma Lugundu. There's a Lemba saying that once we heard a drum because we were a holy people. Nothing precise is known about the origin of the Lemba. It is not the intention of the article to try to solve that issue, or that of the Ngoma Lugundu, although it is based upon the sketchy evidence. Elderly Lemba informants still recall the story told by the great grandparents. They came by boat, some say on the back of a tree, to Africa from a very remote place called Sena, on the other side of the Fusela, but they did not know where the Fusela was. A terrible storm nearly destroyed them. The boat was broken into 2 pieces. Now, remember this part of the story, because we will reference it, again, because too many parallels, too many similarities with another story somewhere else. So one of them reached the shores, the others were taken away with the second half of the boat, and they do not know what happened to them. Remember, this is very interesting because you're gonna see the same story among the Luhya, telling about the story about the boats splitting into two. So how did the Luhya know about these? Are people who are divided like by thousands of miles from each other. No communication, no phones, no internet, but telling the same story. Yet they're not even they're very far from each other. How do they know? So the story continues to say they arrived among the Manyai, but they were not related to them. But after time, they moved southward to what is now called Limpopo. When Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonian, and many Jews were captured, some of the Bassan escaped and migrated to open space in Yemen. My question is, how do they know all these things? So basically, that's what we're going to be discussing today. So the Sena, the Shenzi, the Wali. So the Sena or the Shenzi, they talked about the Shenzi. They talk about the Sena, the Wali. All these three, they can still be found among the Luhya. Now let's go into the book. It says the drum of the dead was brought to the present location of the Shenzi people, who are today called the Venda. The sacred drum of the Shenzi belonged to the departed ancestor of the time when they were living in the north. Among all the musical instruments, the greatest and that which was feared and revered most of the people was this instrument of the royal ancestor spirit, the drum of Mwari. Now, Mwari, and then we found the same word but with a little difference among the Luhya called Nuari or Vuari. So how do we know about this? The ancestors god of the Shenzi and the Kalanga. So it continues, says the king was feared because he could work miracles with the drum of the gods. His enormous city was built on a mountain, another parallel. The drum was seen and beaten by no one except the high priest. So all these parallels, all these similarities of the Nwali, of the Sena, of the Shenzi, how? So now the Lemba, like I said, the Lemba they claim they migrated on boats. They have Wadi. Let's continue. So so again, the Sena in North. Let me start. Africa Lemba tradition hold that the tribe came from Sena in North by boat. The original group is said to have been entirely male. Remember when I said about female being captured by, yes, by those Karo tribes. With half of their numbers having been lost at sea, the remainder made their way to the coast of Africa. Once there, they rebuilt the city of Sena, later leaving it to build a second city of the same name. Sena is variously identified by the Lemba as Sana'a in Yemen. Now, you see, we are painting a picture here. You know, what happened, who did it, who did what to who. So yeah, these are not like books that are written today. No, these are old books. Now, for you to understand history, any kind of history, you need to understand chronology of events, and they must align together. And history, for it to be a full history, you need other people outside your own group to collaborate your story or your claims for it to be ascertained as truth. Today we have European history, which cannot be ascertained, cannot be collaborated by other people other than the European themselves. And that's the kind of problem we have, because we have places like Mount or let's say Lake Victoria. These names, it is not supported by any other, because you cannot have an English mountain inside of Africa. You cannot have Mzungu's history in Africa. They have tried to do it. They have tried to impose their own history so that you don't go back and see or learn the true history of these places. And that is what is called the Victorian era history, where the Mzungus went around the world renaming places, calling New Hampshire, New Zealand, Newfound. But that is not the real history. The real history is hidden, where other people collaborate their own history and events in a sequence that is well documented and orderly documented. So, like I said, the chronology of history is very important in certain events, because it gives us a timeline in a way that in a way that events happen, and history must be collaborated by others for it to be accurate. So, like I've said, there's so many similarities. There's so many, things that happen, names and languages or words that you find further down in South Africa, especially among the Lemba, that you find them among the Luhya. So we're gonna look at those things. Number one, the canoes or the boats. Remember them telling about the canoes. Now let's reference this book. It talks about a long time ago, Logoli ancient came from a country called Asia. From Asia, they settled for a time in Misri, then traveled the Nile and arrived in Congo. From Congo, they traveled overland to Uganda, then crossed Lake Victoria from Uganda by canoes made from reeds to today's Kisumu, Kenya. Some of our fathers died on the journey. A strong wind on the Lake Victoria is said to have split up the canoes, and the result is that some of our fathers went south and some went north. However, the grandfather of all was the same person. And whenever people went, they left behind those who had the same custom and language of Logoli. The forefather of Logoli, the ancestors of Logoli people, stayed in some time, many years, in the shores of Lake Victoria from about 1250 to 1950. Now, this is very important because you read the same story about the canoes coming from north, and it's basically this is now collaborating. It's collaborating. Okay, there are a group of people coming from north, long time ago. This is not something that happened in 1800, or this is something that happened long time ago. And you see, they're talking about the strong wind splitting up canals, and their forefathers were divided or split into two. So how do they know all these things? How do they come up with these stories? So, and then another similarity is in the interior of the cave is a hut. From the center of post which drum the chief object to reach important is the drum ngoma, which is about 2 feet high. It's said to have been kept in the rock cave for many generations. Now, how do they come up with the same story, hiding a drum in a cave? Same thing is happening in Zimbabwe, where the Lembas are hiding a drum in a cave. Now, I'll tell you something about the replicas, because that's another important story that most people don't even know. So, like I've said, the religious aspect of all this story is about, you see, there's a culture, it's like a software. These people had the same software, the same thing that they were observing or doing. They were all performing this thing at the same time, performing culture or something that is similar, and you have another people coming behind them who are trying to delete it or to make sure this thing disappears. So anyway, the religious observance that involve the assembly of people on a tribal scale, I have been able to accord to the Logoli. This is a book written by people like Wagner, Gunther. These are all books these are not books written in 2000 or yesterday. These are very old books written in either 1930s, 1920s. So it says the Logoli had a religious or whatever way of assembling and performing religious activities. So yeah, let's continue. Now, as you continue, you see, before the Logoli were called Maragoli, they were called Masana, and used to have North and South Maragoli. So South Maragoli, where the real Morogoli lived, the priest Morogoli, all these they call themselves Masana. But it is until the missionaries arrived that now you see the name Masana going further south, and it just remain as a clan. And now they replaced with the word Maragoli, which is still not a name. You don't have a person called Maragoli. That's not a real name. Just like you don't have Luhya is not a real name. But these are all same people. They are the same people. One group of people coming from Buganda. They were the priests and the kings. Same people from one cloth. These are same people. All of them are same people. But they were being invaded by the Karo people, forced them to what is today called the Luhya land. And then you have, among them you have the kings, you have the, like I'm talking, when I say king, you have the royalty, and then you have the priest coming together or staying together to avoid being, deleted by the Karo tribes. So going back to the Masana, the Masana name was the original name of those who claimed, the priesthood. They call themselves Masana for a reason. You don't just claim a name. You don't just come up with a name. You have a name because either it's the people who call you by that name, or because of, maybe it's an ancestral name. So as you do more research, you find that a long time ago they were called Masana. The word Maragoli Logoli came from the Nilotic people who imposed that name, and it's for another reason. When you go deep into the word Logoli, you find Logoli means, if you go to Tanzania, if you go to Uganda, Logoli means the saved ones, the saved one, the saviors, the saved one, those who are supposed to save us. That's what it means. So Masana, Museno, Maseno, you find these names scattered all over Western Kenya. Most of them don't even know, but they just tell you, oh, our forefather came from Museno, Masena. That's where they told us they came from. They came from Maseno, without deep understanding what this word means. But it all comes from Masana people, the Sana. So you find this word all over Western Kenya. If you go Western Kenya, you find Maseno, Masana, but they don't understand where it came from. So there is an island in Western Kenya called Rusinga and Mfungano. There you find the Sena or Sana. But this place today is under the control of the UNESCO and the Luos. They have completely blocked this place from Maragoli and other group to go back there, and, or even the world as you know it today, from going back and studying that place. It's completely closed. But the whole history of that place is Maragoli and the Luhya. Let me put it that way: the Luhya people. They are the ones who built the Sena. Let's go. Let's continue. Now you can trace the migration of the modern Luhyas coming down from Uganda. You have one group going direct to Mount Elgon because they were being protected by the Kalenjins, and the other group, even the Maasai. The Maasai used to be, around that area. The Ilgishu, also called Ilgishu Maasai, they're protecting the Luhyas there from the Luos and the other groups. So you have one group going direct to Mount Elgon, and then you have another group, the priests and the royal group, migrating down, going to Sena and Themli Chwenga, where they hide for many generations. And then after a while, they decide to go back and revenge. They go back to Toro, Uganda. They unalive one of their prince, which is a Luo, was now, they had made themselves the kings, but they could not rule because these are feudal. They don't understand how to rule, just like the Somalis and the Ethiopian, the Tutsi. They don't have, it's not part of the culture. They don't understand how to rule. They don't have the king. They can't run a kingdom. They can't be a ruler. These are feudalists. It's part of it's DNA thing. They don't understand how to rule people. They say that they are warlike tribes. So they impose their own system on the people of Uganda. Now these Suba, Logoli and a few other groups create one wave of group, whatever. They go back to Uganda, revenge. They unalive the prince. The Luo call for backup. You get more Luos coming down to to assert power. So now it becomes something else. This is now between 1700 to 1800 war. So the Luhyas are being pushed like nothing else. So by the time Zungus arrived, it was like, especially the Luhya, especially the Maragoli, they saw it as a savior, or God had done something like a miracle, because they were clearing, they were deleting all these people. That's why you have very few Subas remaining to this day. The Subas were unalive in their thousands by the Luos. And this is something that has been documented not by the Luhyas or the Luos, but it has been documented by their group. They are the enemies, like the Hima, the Nyankole. They know it very well. They will tell you what happened. So you have a group like the Sweta, who are, pretty much, they thought like, they can be protected by the Luo. or being enslaved in Uganda. They were the last one to move down and join other Luhyas. By the time they arrived, there were very few because they were being analyzed by the Luhyas. So this map basically shows you what happened, and to who, to where, who was doing it, and all those kind of things. So another thing is the Vuali or Nwali. You see the same word among the Lembas. You see the same vendor. You see the same word being used by the Hindus, but they call it Diwali. It means fire or light. It comes from the Sanskrit, if you know the Sanskrit records. But whereas you find it in the Sanskrit as recorded, you find it in the present day Luhya and the Lemba. They still call the fire Vuali, or the vendor. They call it Vuali and Nwali, which means light or fire. Now, this is very important. You see, as you go deep, you're gonna see how these add up all together. So you see, among the Luhya, instead of calling Nwali, they call it Vuali. They could say the first Vuali, according to this book, it said the first Vuali was kindled in March or April, during which all Maigori clans congregated at Mungoma Cave to pray for Bampa. And then in September, on October, they gathered again to supplicate God for rich harvest of sorghum and ovule. So, like I've said, all the Luhyas will, come together and observe this, and they knew when the fire was called Vuadi. Vuadi, just like the Luhya, the word Luhya, it does not mean what you understand today. It's kind of difficult to explain this, because sometimes when you try to explain, especially things like the word Luhya, some people feel like you're offending them because they have been taught to believe things in a certain way that they cannot believe whatever you're telling them is truth. But the word Luhya, it's a sacrificial stone, which those who have stolen our history, they call it Ola, but it's Luhya, the stone of Ya, Luhya, where you sacrifice on the stone. But we will discuss that in another video. So the story of the ark being hidden in or the Ngoma, it sounds very much similar to the story of Jeremiah, where it says Jeremiah hid something in a cave. Here it refers when Jeremiah, this in the book of Maccabees, 2 Maccabees 2:5-8 says, Jeremiah arrived here, he found the chambers in a cave in which he put the tent, the ark, the altar of incense, then he sealed the entrance. This is, so like I've said, why would the Luhyas and the Lembas, the vendors, pick a cave as a place to hide one of their most important thing, religious thing? Why not hide it in a lake or a river? And why hills? Why caves and hills and not nowhere else? Remember, this is not the same generation. This is like generation, like 100 of generation later. Like these are many years later. These are kids of the children of the children of the children of people that maybe died a long time ago. So who told them? How did they learn about this? About caves? About why do they trust the cave so much? Why do they call Vuali or the fire? Why do they call Luhya and not any other names? Is it coincidence? Now you see again here, I don't want to go deep into this because it needs a lot of time to explain, because every time you try to teach people what you have, basically what I've done on my research, some people feel so much connected to what they have been taught as truth than what is reality. Example, when I say Luhya does not mean tribe, it means the fireplace, it means the stone of the sacrifice. Most people feel like we are offending them because they have been made by UNESCO and the Mzungu. The way the Mzungu have it's like they have made them believe whatever it has been taught to them. They believe that is the truth and nothing else can be true. They'll tell you it's a clan name, it is their name, it is this name. They don't understand. The understanding is very narrow. So when you try to tell them the truth, it becomes like you're fighting. So I'd rather leave it there. But if you do more research, you discover the word Luhya, as a matter of fact, it's supposed to be Y-A-H or Y-H-A, but the Mzungu had to add Y-A so that you will never know what the real meaning of this word. But the Luhya is a fireplace. Now, fireplace for what? They, what fireplace? They trying to make it look like it's just a random place, but it was not a random place. It did not. And remember, the naming of tribes did not come from the tribe. The people did not name themselves. They are either your enemies or other people who named you. So remember in the Bible, when he say, hey, what's the name of the God who appeared to Moses? He says his name is I am that I am. But that does not make sense. You can't be present. You have to be present, future, or past, present. So I was who I am, or I am who I was. So, but if you look at it in this word, they say Iye Ashiri Eye, which makes a lot of sense. If you go back to the Greek, before the Greek Roman, the original word was Eye Ashir Eye, which is Luhya. You don't even need a further explanation. This is Luhya. Eye Ashiri Eye. Him is still him, or like the present, he's still there, the one in the past. Eye Ashiri Eye. That is Luhya. What other evidence do you want? This is self-sufficient. I am who I was. So more parallels. We're gonna dive deeper and see more parallels. Now, for those who know Thimli Chwenga, look at that entrance. From that picture, you might think, or you might assume that you're looking at Thimli Chwenga, but that is not Thimli Chwenga. That is a fortress in Yemen. Look at the architect. Look at the entrance, especially the entrance. Pay more attention, because you're gonna find something that will shock your mind. Now, this is Sana'a, where they found they did a DNA, and actually, there's a lot of, anyway, I don't want to go into deep to that. I mean, I don't want to discuss that today, but just pay attention to that door. Pay attention to that door in Sana'a, Yemen. Now let's look. And then this is Yemen. I'm talking about Sana'a, where you get the name Masana. Now look at that. That is Thimli Chwenga. Look at the door. Look at the architecture. There's a lot of similarity. I don't think this is just coincidence. Yeah. Now I don't want to go deep into this. In the next video, I'll talk about this, the theory of David, Palestine. But they still have the same name, Suba, and the Luhyas have always, meant to have the same name, Soba. So I'll talk about this in a later video. Soba, you might think I'm talking about, a random name or a random place, yeah, but it's Soba, city of David. Do you think it's just coincidence that we have a Soba in a city of David called Soba, with the same structure, Thimli Chwenga, the same as the Great Wall of Zimbabwe, same structure in Yemen? Is it just by coincidence? Anyway, now I'm gonna reference this Luo historian because they have a lot to say about many things. Let me quickly jump it because we have a lot to cover. So according to this guy, he says, let us settle the issue of tomboy. These are Luo historian talking to the Suba people. He says there's only tomboy is a Suba but also claimed by Maragos and Luo. There's only one Yoga, the son of Kigunga, Wagunga, Kaksingi, Regi, the Wasimbi. Linguistic group include the Maragoli, Kisi and Shona, read the Ngoni group. The Gasunga and Maragoli at some stage lived parts of Zimbabwe, Zambia, eastern part of DRC, Rwanda, Tanzania before settling in Kenya. The Maragolis were usually the first to migrate. The Kasugunga would always follow the footsteps of the Maragoli. One of the things the Maragoli was good at was building the stone fortress, Ohinga. They built the ones in Zimbabwe, Kadem, the one in Kirambo, in Gwasi and Kasugunga. Now you see, this is not coming from me. It's not coming from, it's coming from them. They're telling the truth. It says some settled in Asembo, Bay Area, part of Ayuga. Some made it present day Hamisi. Remember, Hamisi, it's a place in Maragoli, Vihiga. And these names are the ones, people like Patrick or whatever, the guy working for BBC, say, oh, this is a Semitic word that came from that place. Now you can post this and read the rest of the story. But you see, every time you talk about the Maragolis, the Luhya, you have to remember you see a lot of Suba, because Suba were the main rulers or the main priest, the main how you call it, the main the royal group that used to rule all other groups. So now we go down further south and you find the Shona. and they talk about migrating from Tanganyika. And something that struck me was the word Guruswa, and it sounded very close to the word Luswa. And I was reading the thing of Bemba, a tribe called Bemba, and found the word Luswa, and I was like, okay, how do they know this word Luswa? Anyway, that's another topic for another day. But how did the Shona tell that their forefather came from Guruswa? And then you see the word Mbire, and you see it all online, because you have Mbire, Mbale, Wambare, you see. So how did they come up with this story if, nothing happened before, long time ago? Anyway, let's continue. So remember, like I said, the Luhyas are one people. All the Luhyas that you see today, they are the same people, but coming from Uganda. Some, like I've said, some were kings, some were priests, and many other groups among them. And this is why the Luos single them out, and they still do it political to this day. They know who the Luos are, but the Luos themselves don't understand these things. Anyway, so but let me read from this book. Say, but while the affinities of the language would point to a common origin, belongs to such a remote age, they give but help in the task confronting us. Our only hope is that the ancestors. So this is talking about the Maragoli. Somewhere down it says, for instance, the Maragoli occupy a large and populous location. And they say that the ancestors Maragoli came from Shirati in Tanganyika territory. Now, this is not their point of origin, because some people confuse it. Like when you say this, they assume that Maragoli were created in Tanganyika. No, this is their migrational route. Just like the Shona, they were not created in Tanganyika. This is where they settled for generation after being, after fleeing from somewhere else. There's so many groups they see in Mombasa and many other places that they trace their migration back to Tanga. Tanga means Kutanga, where you start. You have the same Kutanga even in Eastern Congo. It is the same story. They moved there, settled down there, and then when the invaders arrived, they had to move. But that's basically what I'm talking about. This is where they settled for generations before moving again, because they are being followed by these groups. Now, like I've said, these people are migrating, and their migration can be traced back to Tororo and Mount Elgon. It didn't just happen. It was not because of they were looking for food or anything. It is because of the invaders. They knew what group they were looking for, why they were looking for them. This is the cause of the migration. So you can find all this group today, the people you call the Luhya. You can trace them back to this migration, fleeing from Tororo, coming to Kisumu, and going to Shirazi, and then climbing, going back to where other Luhyas were. Now, another word that kind of struck me is the word of Bubi, because these Bubi were the main people who pretty much led the Luhyas, especially the Maragoli and the Nyore, the Bubi group. And you find the same name, but with very small, different sounding, called Buba among the Lemba. So how did they, how did they just come up with this word, Bubi, Buba? How? So many similarities. Still the names, the words like Abasirati. Yeah. So how did they just come up with these words or these names? Now, in this book, it talks about basically what the Luos did. How they were telling the Mzungu they took the land. So let me just reference it. It says, in the days gone by, the distribution of the Bantu was much wider than it is now. The old men of the tribe possess a strong historical sense and are minds of historical laws and tradition fast passing away, and to say the main lines of tradition that hand down as trustworthy as tradition is generally accepted to be world over. According to these old men, it would appear that generations ago they occupied land away to the west of their present holding land, now in the possession of Kavirondo Nilotes. They link up with the Bantu in Busoga in Uganda Protectorate. So you understand what I'm saying? They pretty much chase them or kick the Luhyas from Uganda, or from the rulers of the kingdom of Uganda. So continue say the struggle which goes in the mind of the Bantu narrator is amazing. At times, for he obviously unwilling to admit any superiority of Paralles on the part of Nilotes, and they are resentful that the land formerly in the possession of his tribe have been wrestled from them and now in the possession of their all-time enemies, so that they have lost much land, and it is never because anyway. Long story short, the Nilotes took over the land, like the land, the entire land they today call Kisumu, Nyanza area, the whole land. It used to be, owned by the farmers, but it was wrestled from them. Anyway, that's a long story. I don't want to go into details because it will make this video, go for hours and hours. So basically, everything collaborate together. So another piece of evidence, it talks about the Luhyas using the flood as a form of weapon, to fight the Luos. The Luos, have always that's why the Zungus. Remember when the Kenyatas were talking and the Mois were saying, hey, we have to make especially the Maraguli and Nyoles be the people who can study rain or whatever in Vihiga. It was because the Luos. And imagine today the Luhyas don't even know this, but the Luhyas could control rain and flood the lakes, that's our rivers. And that's how the Luhyas used to fight in war. I will talk about that in another video, how the Luhyas were fighting. It was only the Luhyas adapted spears, arrows, and shield in 1900 when, as a matter of fact, the Nyangori, the group called Nyangori, the people of Mount Elgon, who told the Luhyas how to use spears and bows. Before that, no Luhya could use it. This is well documented. The Luhyas only use flooding, like flood the rivers, and sling. Is it called sling? The one the Luhyas are using today, it came from the Luhyas. This is well documented. Luhyas were using this. Is it called sling? And stones to fight the Luos and other group. And then the Luos adapted it because it was very effective. So the Luos said, oh, okay, let's use whatever their military means to subdue them. So they were using the same thing that our ancestors were using. But they could not. Even when they wanted to fight the Luhyas, they had to go to the Banyore to use the same thing they were using. I'm talking about the rains and the river. Because the Nyoles, for some reason, that is well documented, decided to snitch against the Maragoli. So they will be paid or whatever they used to do. The Luos will go and tell the Manyore, hey, you guys, can you help us attack them? So the Nyoles will do the same thing. They will help the Luos in flooding the rivers. Flood the river just the same way the Maragos would do. It's called the Nganyi. The Nganyi would sometimes help the Luos to fight the Luhyas. So you can pause and read this. It tells you about all that, about how the Luhyas, the rainmakers, used to flood the rivers in war or fighting the Luos. Now I want to touch on the last, it's almost the last part of the video about the Agreement Agreement. The Agreement Agreement, this is an agreement between the British and the Luos. In that pact or agreement, the Luos were used as the military, and in exchange they would take over the land, the remaining land of the Luhyas, and control military, religiously, politically rule over the Luhyas. That was the pact. That's why you don't have any Luo or historical Luos being in fight or fighting against the Luo. It also explains how the people like Obama's father were being airlifted to US, because he was like telling them, thank you for helping us, helping Muzungu achieve their goal. So these are called the Siaya group. This way you have group like the Siaya. And now in another video I'll talk about the Kiambu, because these are the Kiambu group. The Kiambu people are not the same people as the people of Muranga. These are completely two different people. So I'll talk about the Kiambu and the Siaya. These are two groups who subdued the Great Lakes. Now we'll talk today. I'm just putting more emphasis on the Luos, and then the next one, maybe in the future, I'll talk about the Kiambu. Like I said, the Kiambu are not the same people as the people of Muranga. These are completely two different people, genetically, DNA, and I have all evidence. I will show you evidence by evidence. I have all the receipts to show you what I'm talking about. Now, so like I've said, this you can pause and read this about the Jokawino, in the military. These are all military wings coming down to subdue and delete the culture of the Luhyas. So they had an agreement with the British, and I believe this agreement is part of many other agreements that they had in North Bahar el Ghazal with the Turks, with the Ethiopians, with the Ottomans, before they could, do what they did to the Kitara. So this is not even the first agreement. They did many agreements before this. So in part of that agreement, they wanted to take over the Nabongo or Kabaka. Remember, the word Kabaka means three, the Kavaka. So the Kabaka family is related to the rulers of present day Nabongo Mumia. They were the same people. You can trace this lineage back to the same royal blood that you have today among the Suba. These were royal bloodline that came from another group called Shikanda. Shikanda was the only cousin of King David. Only one, King David. And they know this very well. You can go back to Makuria, further north, Makuria. They talk about Shikanda, and Shikanda was last seen in Nubia, and they knew them as the people of the Suba. And after that, they disappeared. And then later on, you have the King Ezana. It was not even a king because these are feudalists. Feudalists don't have kingdom. They don't make kingdoms. So this King Ezana, they come down, they conquer Nubia, delete all the books which are written in Suba, and then they translate them to Ge'ez or Ge'ez. So the Luos, when they come down, these are mercenaries sent to recover anything that maybe these people still had. So the only thing that they found is the culture and the drum. So they were trying to delete that part to make sure you are empty, like you don't have anything by the time Zungos arrive. So you see, it's not accident, it's not just by coincidence. All these things are all well planned, well executed, but the whole time you don't know. You don't know. You are not a part of. You're not allowed to learn these things. So the Luos tried to become the kings of the Luyas, but they could not. They failed, and it is written in this book about the sages of the Luo faction trying to impose the Mpako, but it did not work. The reason why it did not work is because these are feudal, just like the Tutsi, the Hima. They are all feudalists. They cannot. The feudalism cannot work with the royalty. They cannot work together. That's why Kagame is having a lot of problem trying to rule over the Hutus and now moving deep into Congo, because these are feudal. This is part of the DNA. Just like what is the other name? You have another group in West Africa. It's called Fulani. They're all feudal. These are warlike tribes. Just like Somali. You see how long the Mzungu have tried to make them, have a kingdom, but they cannot. It's because they are feudal. In Ethiopia, they are feudal. They cannot. Just like you see it in Middle East, they cannot have a kingdom because they don't accept one person to rule them. They are feudalists. They are warlike. It is in their DNA. They cannot have one person rule over 10 other people. No, they will not accept it. So they want to be free, but they want to have other people below them. It is part of it is their DNA. So, like the Luos tried to infiltrate Mumia. They send him. Actually, after the Muslims arrived, because they tried for a very long time to infiltrate the Mumia, but they couldn't. But later on, when the British arrived, they allowed a lot of Luos to settle in Mumias and take over the history. But what happened was the collapse, and then they changed history. Where when the UNESCO and the Luos eventually became the superpower of East Africa, and our land was moved from eastern Uganda to now the Galaland, or what is called Kenya. Kenya used to be called Galaland or the Galas, because these were the Cushitic, the modern Cushitic, not the original Cushitic. These are not the original Cushitic. The modern Cushitic, the word Cushit, the Cushitic that you have today was a made-up story by Germans, just to make sure they delete the story of Kush. So these Somalis and whatever of Galas, there's the Oromo stock, which is now modern Kenya or eastern part of Kenya. Don't confuse with Mombasa. Mombasa is a different story, but I'm talking about the modern Kenya, what is called the central part of Kenya. They all lumped together, and made a one country. And this is not by accident, but very deliberate. So the Luos were trying to usurp or to destroy or maybe assimilate and destroy the history of the Nambongo, which up to that's why you still have people like Raila doing it and marrying into the Basuba, the Banyore, and the many others. And now they have the same people. You see how they're using the Banyore against the Maragoli today. You know, they're still doing it. You know, if you go to Maragoli, there's no history other than what is coming from the outside. They're using brothers to fight among themselves. So right now they're using the Banyore to fight against the Maragoli. Right now as we speak. So it's all, this is ancient warfare. It's ancient. These are problems that is coming from people who have tamaa. They have tamaa to make sure they delete the history. That's what it is. So if you have time, you can pause, read this. It will tell you everything that I'm telling you. This, I didn't write it. It does not come from me. These are Luo historians telling you as it is. Yeah, like I said, if you have time, you can go and read the Ogrimiti agreement. It will tell you what happened. Because people like Mekatilili, the lady who was fighting for the Taita and the other groups, you know, in Mombasa, and the Menza, even the Arabs who are in Mombasa, Zanzibar, it was the Luo who were subduing them for the Germans and for the British. They were all working under the agreement of the Ogrimiti. So, under this agreement, they were to subdue everybody else, and then return, the Muzungu will give power, land, and control, plus money and everything else to them. So, it is still happening. So, if you understand that, you'll understand history. It will help you understand what happened. Now, is it just by coincidence that one of the oldest trading hub in Zimbabwe, which was formed by the Lemba and the Shona, is called the Mbare, Wambare? How did that word appear in Zimbabwe, Mbare? Was it just coincidence? Mbare market. It's called Mbare Musika, one of the oldest, and today is one of the biggest markets in Zimbabwe. It's called Mbare. Is it just coincidence? And a lot of the rugby players in Zimbabwe come from this area. Not in that market, but in that area. They come from Mbare. Just coincidence? Now, in Kenya, Western Kenya, you have Mbale, which is one of the oldest. This is like the second, no, it was actually the third biggest market created by the Luhyas. All the Luhyas used to come here, like all of them, before there were any trade market. Even the Bukusus, today the Bukusus say they are, you know, whatever, but historically, all the Luhyas used to meet at Mbale to do barter trade. Is it just coincidence? Now, before Mbale of the Luhyas, they had another one in Uganda called Mbale, and the same story. They used to trade right there, all the Luhyas. And this is what made Uganda a superpower of, you know, back then, the Chwezi, the Shenzi. This goes back to the Shenzi, because these were traders and the ritualists, the priests and the raw, and they were so peaceful to allow people to come and trade with them. And they were farmers, they were growing a lot of food. So, is it just coincidence that we have Mbale in Uganda? It became one of the biggest markets, you know, a long time ago. It crashed by the, you know, by the Luos, disappears. Then we have another Mbale. Before Mbale it was Kisumu. Kisumu was Okusuma. Before Okusuma, which is today called Kisumu, it becomes a powerful market. And then the Luos come in, take over everything, destroy it, and then it disappeared from the world history. Then we have Mbale. Mbale become one of the biggest market. And then the Europeans arrive, they crush it, and then it disappeared from, you know, from history. Now we have Nairobi. Nairobi being the biggest hub, now using money, which is, you know, it comes from Zungu. Anyway, that's a story for another day. But having said all that, do you think all this is just by coincidence, or, you know, there's something into it? There's some, you know, does it give you some clues about what happened and still happening, or these are all just coincidence?
The British came to Kenya, they said, yo, that group over there, that group over there, that group, that group, that group, that group, all of you are now a country. We're like, what the fuck? We don't even like them. Like, come on, choose the leader amongst you. It's called democracy. Goodbye. And people look at us as though we're crazy, right? Like in a country like Nigeria, they've got 500 different tribes, 500 languages. How the hell are they going to communicate? In the Congo, 215. Kenya, we have 44 languages.
Now, do you think that was just coincidence? All these things coincidence? You know, especially democracy in Kenya. You think in the East African, or how they call East African, whatever, what became Kenya today? Why did they move us from Eastern Uganda? Why? Why was Eastern Uganda moved from Uganda and then lump us with the Galas of Kenya? And then after they moved us from Uganda, they've never allowed us to rule, like never. And I have books, Mzungu saying, hey, we should never allow the Luhyas to rule, especially Nabongo, because he's a peaceful man. We don't want a peaceful man to rule Kenya. Because if you have a peaceful man ruling Kenya, they would not need us. Yeah, we need somebody from the warlike tribes. And immediately you have Kenyatta, you have Odingas, and Kenya becomes crazy for 50 years. Do you think that was just by coincidence? This is not political. I'm just trying to give you, a hint of what Mzungu did or what he had in his mind. Today, their main goal is to make sure we continue to dilute our blood, to make sure we intermarry and eat any food and accept all kind of cultures, because by that we lose our own history, we lose our software, and eventually we become what we are not supposed to be. So remember, the Eastern Uganda was transferred to Gala. Remember, when they say the East African Railway or Ugandan Railway, they're talking about railway that stopped in Busia, not even Uganda. Remember, the East African Railway came from Mombasa to Busia, and that was part of Uganda for 20 years. It was being called the Ugandan Railway. But it never reached the modern Uganda. There was no line connecting that railway from Busia to Kampala, but it's called Uganda Railway. It is 20 years later that they will eventually create or build a single line that would reach Buganda. But the whole time it is known as Buganda Railway. You think that's just coincidence? Now I've skipped a lot of things because you make this video very long, and I've been doing it in rush. But if you wanna pause to read it, you're welcome to do that, because there's a lot of things that I can't say